welcome. Thank you. Well remembered. Thank you very much for joining this webinar on new life in old trees, harnessing urban natural heritage for sustainable cities. It's brought to you by IUCN, the Green Pop Foundation, ICLEI, UNECE, which is the Economic Commission for Europe, and Earthwatch Europe, where I work. I am Russell Gault, and I am your moderator for the next hour. Kindly note that this meeting is recorded. It will be published online for future viewing shortly after the webinar. You are encouraged and welcome to pose any questions to the panelists or to me via the chat box, which you can hopefully find on your screens. And before introducing our esteemed panelists, I'd like to hand over to Loredana Scuto. Loredana is IUCN's Urban Program Officer, and I believe she is able to share some information about this IUCN Engage platform that we are currently using. Over to you, Loredana.
Thank you, Russell, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Loredana Scuto, and I serve as IUCN Urban Program Officer based in our office in Bonn, Germany. And on behalf of IUCN, I would like to thank you for attending our webinar today. And please allow me to spend just a few moments to present a bit IUCN and also the platform that is hosting us today, which is IUCN Engage. So as many of you may know, IUCN is the largest and most diverse global environmental framework and network. We bring together states and national governments, indigenous peoples' organizations, and also NGOs. And our members are the ones that shape our conservation agenda. We collaborate with over 1,400 members, and also with our commissions, which are scientific bodies that gather over 15,000 volunteer scientists. IUCN started working on urban ecosystems some years ago, and we have developed different knowledge products on urban biodiversity conservation. And therefore, we're really excited to convene this conversation today. So the platform that we're using, it's called IUCN Engage, and it was developed to serve IUCN constituents, to foster knowledge exchanges, and also to facilitate the connection between members from all over the world, our commissions, and also the Secretariat. The platform currently serves over 25,000 users, which are affiliated in a way or another with IUCN. And it also offers different services. Users can, for instance, look for experts in specific subjects. They can look for open consultations and contribute to knowledge development within our union. They can also look for jobs, grants opportunities, and every sort of opportunity that bring together members from all over the world. The platform also offers some specific thematic groups that can facilitate exchange between similar organizations or individuals with similar backgrounds and mandates. And of course, it is also a convening platform that we use to host webinars and also to meet our constituents. So I would invite you to take a look at the platform after the webinar, and please be in touch with IUCN in case you have any questions on the union or also the platform. So thank you again, and enjoy the webinar.
Thanks, Loredana, and I'm very much looking forward to making full use of this IUCN Engage platform. It's the Facebook for conservationists, I understand. So now let's get started. I'm going to share some questions and thoughts and provide a very brief introduction to the concept of urban heritage trees. I'm going to give one example before turning to our panelists and posing questions to them. They're the people you really want to hear from. They have a diverse range of perspectives and some really incredible experience. So firstly, well, why do they stand where they do? What history occurred beneath their branches? Were battles waged? Was power brokered? Were treaties signed and enterprises born? Were slaves sold or convicts hung? Was sweet love made and violated? If only trees could talk. And all of us have met with remarkable trees. I'm sure all of us have sat beneath an ancient tree and wondered, gosh, what stories would it tell if only it could talk? These trees are distinguished by virtue of their extraordinary appearance, their cultural or historical significance, and for many, their venerable old age. And heritage trees are important because they shed light on the values and priorities of current and bygone generations. They were often planted for specific purposes. For example, to supply food, vitamin C perhaps, to supply building materials, ship masts, to delineate territory, to shield against the natural elements, or indeed against enemies. Some were planted for religious or spiritual purposes, for customs and beliefs. Others to honor loved ones or to mark auspicious occasions, and some to remind settlers of home. So these trees are both culture makers and culture mirrors. They both contribute towards and reflect a sense of place. And despite all the changes, the profound landscape changes from wild to rural to urban, from residential to industrial to service-based integrated urban areas, they have survived somehow. They've prevailed against the odds. And that's not always by coincidence. That is often by virtue of the reverence or the veneration accorded to them. Some of them are fulcrums of folklore. They can tell the grand narrative of a nation's history, or perhaps the anecdote, the personal anecdote of a local resident. But there's no doubt these are important ecological and cultural assets that merit special recognition and protection. The Sycamore Gap is a case in point. Some of you may recall in the news last year, this is a tree that was beloved. It stood on or nearby Hadrian's Wall. Hadrian's Wall was built over 1900 years ago by the men of Emperor Hadrian to demarcate the northern extent of Roman Britain, essentially, and to keep out the heathens beyond the wall, my ancestors. And this tree, which was relatively young, perhaps just a few centuries, was appearing in films, most famously Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, a Kevin Costner movie from 1991. But it also appeared in poems and songs and in photographs. It was an Instagram sensation and in many paintings. And yet somehow this tree, this unique and beloved tree, was senselessly and tragically cut down by vandals last year. And what was fascinating was to observe the outrage, the public outrage, widespread outrage against this act. Many were demanding justice for the tree. Police investigation ensued, resulting in multiple arrests. And now the remnants of that tree are being fashioned into sculptures and artifacts to be exhibited in a museum, much like the relics of a saint in a shrine. And so what this event exposed was the deep affection that many of us have, many ordinary citizens have, for extraordinary trees, and the collective desire of our society to better protect and honor our shared natural heritage. So now let me introduce our panelists. We are joined here by John Liu, who is a journalist, filmmaker, and ecologist. And John has turned his camera into a tool for ecological change. He is the founder of the Ecosystem Restoration Camps movement, of which I believe Green Pop is a very proactive member. And he is an ecosystem ambassador for the Common Land Foundation. John has been at the forefront of demonstrating that nature's degradation is not an inevitability to which we must resign, but rather a challenge that we must overcome. And with 56 camps and counting, he's helping the earth make a comeback. We are also joined by Joy Mutai. Joy is an Associate Program Management Officer at UN Habitat, that is the United Nations Human Settlements Program, where she's been shaping urban landscapes with innovative and sustainable solutions for over 7 years now. And she's known for her dynamic approach to urban public spaces, and she's all about building a better world, one city block at a time. So thank you very much, John and Joy, for joining us today. I believe we are also waiting for another panelist. He may or may not come, David Millard. When he does, if he does, I will introduce him then. But without further ado, I suggest we get started. Let's kickstart this discussion. So John or Joy, would either of you be able to help me understand what is so special about heritage trees compared to any other urban tree? Why should heritage trees deserve or merit special recognition and protection? Would either of you like to give this a go?
Joy, would you like to go first? Go ahead, Joy.
Thanks, and thanks, Russell, for the introduction. I think one of the main significance of heritage trees are really their historical significance. One of the more key important aspects of heritage trees that they have diverse significance in terms of culture, but also in terms of ecological significance and aesthetic value. What we are seeing is that compared to other trees, you would see that they are usually have unusual sizes. Their shape might be different, their age, and their association to social value. So what we are seeing is that with what the benefits that they provide, because of their age and because of the way the amount of time they've stayed within the landscapes, these trees are often protected by either protected by legal laws, or could be protected by communities because of the values that they provide to the community. So they might actually have some historical background in terms of the people. They might have already supporting some benefits in terms of ecosystems. So we have seen that heritage trees compared to other trees have a really significance in terms of all these three components: culture, heritage, and ecological value. Yeah, over.
Thanks, Joy. Would you like to add anything there, John?
Well, perhaps I think that from my perspective, what's happening, and maybe you could roll the clip one behind me. So I started off as a journalist looking at history and culture and geopolitics, but I gradually transferred to being most interested in ecology. And so that's fine. Okay, well, I was young once, and I was asked by the World Bank to go out to the Luz Plateau, which looked like this when I first got there. And it was so fundamentally degraded. You could see it in all sorts of ways. And it was interesting to note that this was the cradle of civilization for the Chinese race. So this was where the largest ethnic group on the planet came from. And to understand this, it was shocking to me that this could be the case. How could we come from this? But now it's 30 years on, although this picture shows you 1994 when we started filming, and it's going to transform. This is 2009. So in 15 years, the Chinese were able to restore a vast area. And this was so fascinating to me that I began to consider, what is it that we're supposed to understand about Earth systems? What is the purpose of life? Because in many ways, we seem to be expressing that the purpose of life is to go shopping. And what I found was that the natural zones and the natural vegetation were self-organizing to create symbiotic systems. And I think in terms of the heritage trees, one of the things that we have to realize is that this is not from the recent past. It's not even about the trees which we see now It's about all life since the beginning of time. And that throughout this time, generations and generations of different types of life have come along, and they've evolved. And that evolution evolved to create an oxygenated atmosphere, a fresh water system, and fertile soils. And this ability to do that led to the types of things that we take for granted now. So this is the only planet that we know of. And 3.8 billion years ago, it was very different than it is today. And so we have to take into consideration all this transformation that has taken place, and then realize that when we see the oldest trees, the most beautiful trees, they have mutated from cellular division. They're supported by bacterial and fungal communities, which make mineral nutrients available to biological plants, and that they have transformed the planet through photosynthesis, the ability to have an oxygenated atmosphere. And this is created, constantly filtered, and continuously renewed the systems that we rely on for life. And very late into this, human beings emerged. And when human beings emerged into this, we began to degrade these systems. And what we need to understand is that all these systems are needed. All these systems are useful. And the representation of heritage trees is the highest level that we can see. But the oldest ones we have are thousands of years old. So we're usually looking at trees which are a few hundred years old. But we really need to be thinking about this arc of time, and that we are here now, but we're just passing through. And we need these systems to be intact. And what causes this is the creation, constant filtration, and continuous renewal of these systems. And that's represented by climax equilibrium systems. So heritage trees, to me, means the beauty and the strength and the ability to see this. And that's enough for me.
Thank you very much, John. That was very inspiring. And I presume this is your footage you have shot.
Yeah, these are from films that I've made. Hope in a Changing Climate, Green Gold, Kiss the Ground. Others have used these materials.
Wonderful, wonderful. From all over the world, I imagine.
Many parts of the world.
Yeah.
I also spent several years as a research fellow with IUCN.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to ask another question to you, Joy, which is about the benefits and opportunities that these heritage trees present, particularly in cities, where we know people are generally not fulfilling their right or need to nature. And why are heritage trees particularly important? And what are the benefits and opportunities that they can bring to cities to improve quality of life, to improve culture, cultural cohesion, perhaps, and even, thinking even broader, ecotourism, urban cooling, these sorts of benefits. Might you be able to elaborate? Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. I think I'll take it back a little bit because we are talking about cities. And one of the reports that came out in 2018 was that 55% of people live in cities. And that is also expected to grow to 68% by 2050. What does that mean? As cities continues to grow, we are, basically growing and impacting green areas and green spaces. Most of the time, these are the ones that are sacrificed as a result. And this is not only because of the spatial growth of cities and the unprecedented growth of cities, but also we are seeing that within cities, there's also an issue of infill development. So therefore, we are seeing, lack of, preservation of nature within cities. So we are seeing that there's this growing need for planners as cities continue to grow to think about compact development to ensure nature is integrated within cities. So urban planners are currently prioritizing nature and in particular green infrastructure and how that can connect with grey infrastructure. But how can you effectively do that? To even start protecting the nature that is in cities and the heritage trees and that is in cities, you need to first of all understand what is existing. There needs to be a study and create an inventory as to why we are studying this and why we are protecting the spaces. So we are seeing that even with studying nature in cities, we look at how functions of different, nature, trees, plants can provide. And with that, you kind of realize what are the resilience of those nature, what is the growth patterns, how do they respond to urban stresses, but also how do you convert them for better urban management. Just to give you a little bit of an example, in Wuhan, China, together with the city of Wuhan, we undertook, together as UN Habitat, we undertook an assessment of heritage spaces. So we are looking at open public spaces, but also we are looking at streets. And what was very clear and came out quite clearly is the importance of street trees and the way people would like to use street trees to connect to different places. And in one of the districts, for example, in Jianghang, one of the 13 districts within Wuhan, we found that there are, comfort trees that are within this, street trees, very beautiful, wide canopy, almost a century old, and people enjoy using those spaces. They are providing opportunities for, dining, leisure walk, strolling. So already we could see that importance of the tree for that, ensuring pedestrian walkability within the district itself and the heritage district. Something else that was quite clear is that they prefer walking along those streets, especially in the summer, because of the cooling effect that they provide, and they connect different open public spaces. So you can already see that there is a green network that can be provided with heritage trees. And as residents want to move from one area to another within street trees, they prefer, especially in the summer, shaded environment. Something that is quite clear in terms of benefits is that we travel, internationally, but also locally to see these heritage trees. Giving an example, we have the Tree of Life in Bahrain, quite very far within the city. From the city center, people travel a distance into the desert to see this Tree of Life. So you can clearly see that there is ecotourism that can be accrued from this, because there is, businesses that are supported by this travel of different, tourists, both local and international. Of course, we have seen that looking at different trees, for example, mangrove vegetation. One example, a very good example, is here in Kenya, in the coastal side of Kenya, where the trees are usually protected because of the environmental benefits that they provide, not only by the number of, the carbon sequestration that they are absorbing, but also because of the aesthetic beauty that they have. People want to walk in these boardwalks and they just want to view nature in the coastal area. Something else that I just want to add in terms of the benefits of nature, not only about the environmental benefit, but the aesthetic benefits, but also there's that need to preserve these trees within cities to preserve that nature, but also for community engagement. In Nairobi, we have a very big, one of the biggest urban forests called Karura Forest within Eastern Africa. And the forest was actually protected by the city because of the many numerous trees that exist. Some of them are over 200 years old. But how do you protect such a space within a growing city? There are legal protections that exist. And how do you enjoy those spaces? What the city has done is that they've created elevated walkways. They've created spaces where people can come and have recreational activities within Karura Forest. So at the heart of the city, you have this nature that is really, eco-friendly, beautiful space. And of course, there are other initiatives that you can engage communities through, this urban forestry and looking at heritage trees specifically. For example, we have the Adopt a Tree campaign that is part of this Green Belt movement, where communities and organizations actually take up the responsibilities of planting trees and actually caring for the trees in the long run. So this is resulting from the knowledge of the importance of trees and the importance of heritage trees within cities. And that movement has really grown. We're really happy to see even grassroots organizations taking this up and actually implementing. And they're very keen to look at indigenous trees even while they're planting those trees within the framework. So in conclusion, I would just say that there are multiple benefits from social, environmental, but also economic benefits that can be accrued from heritage trees. And one of the things is just to say, with just looking back to what I mentioned in terms of growth of cities, it is important to ensure that we protect these trees. So over. Thank you.
Thanks, Joy. And you're in Nairobi, right? Yes.
Yes, I'm currently in Nairobi. Yes.
Yeah, so I lived there for a while. I had many happy days running around Karura Forest, and I do recall when I lived there some years ago, a very beloved fig tree was going to be cut down to make way for a motorway expansion, and local people clamored around this tree to defend it. And eventually, at great cost, the authorities rerouted the motorway to avoid this particular tree, which I thought was wonderful. So it's not only the sycamore gap that can attract the attention and investment of authorities, but I wanted to ask a bit more about the challenges that these trees face, because obviously urban areas are under a lot of pressure, that they're more susceptible to climate change, to heat stress, to drought, flooding. And I imagine also the presence of people can increase the risk of vandalism, arson. A city is full of vices and challenges. And earlier today, we had a chap from Cape Town, Altus de Wet, who's the city arborist at the local government of Cape Town. And he said that they're really struggling with some of the very old trees because, well, some of them are reaching the end of their natural lifespan, but also the changing climate is putting an additional stress on these trees. And he spoke about the increasing intensity and severity of storms. Many of the ancient oak trees that have been there for hundreds of years have recently been toppled by severe storms. But he also spoke about the challenges of water use. So some of these heritage trees, particularly in Cape Town, are non-native, and yet they are protected. For example, there's a saffron pear in the middle of Cape Town, which has been there apparently for 350 years, and it still produces fruit, which I think is remarkable. But they cost a lot of money to conserve. And others, the non-native trees, they also consume a lot of water. And in a water scarce area, that can be somewhat challenging. There are trade-offs, of course. But I wanted to ask John a question, if I may. John, why is it so important to increase ecological awareness of these heritage trees? What are some of the ways in which local residents and tourists can be made more aware of the significance of heritage trees?
Yes, well, thank you. I look at it slightly differently because I think we're experiencing so many profound challenges in the world today. And in some ways, this is, it's an odd phenomenon, but humans are, some scientists are calling this the Anthropocene. And the concept there is that human activity is equaling, say, cosmic forces or geologic forces in altering the system. And I think we need to be aware that nature is not just an aesthetic or a concept. It is a physical and symbiotic relationships between life forces which are exchanging energy. We're acting as bivalves, as filters. We're breathing the air. We're exhaling CO2. We're inhaling oxygen. The organic layer, each generation of life dies and gives up its body. And in cities, we have expressed the kind of materialism that if we don't understand that the life support systems on the planet are understood, they come from natural systems. The air, this is the only planet we know that has an oxygenated atmosphere, the water cycle. And so this is not a trivial thing. It's not a lovely place to look. It's giving us life. And people can participate. And since it's human consciousness that's determining the landscape, then if we understand this and we make this the central intention of human civilization, we get a different result. But now we're saying that materialism and maybe accruing as much material possessions to individuals or to special groups or and we're creating differentiation between those who have and those who have not. And many, not a small number, have lost everything. And we can see historically where that comes from as well. But because human beings have this incredible effect, we have to realize that every civilization that followed the materialistic thing and destroyed its ecology failed. And now we're 8 billion people, adding 1 billion people every 12 years still, and we're facing this. And it is functional soils which breathe, which make mineral nutrients from geologic materials bioavailable to plant life, that is the cycle of life and death, because the necromass, the decaying remains of all life since the beginning of time, together with geologic weathered substances, are the basis of soil. And so when we understand that the soil, the water, the biodiversity we can understand this, and this is what gives us life, we need to value it. And when we also see that if we understand this, we can restore all degraded lands on the planet. This is what's possible for people to do, is to understand that this is the duty of all who are alive today, to restore these areas. Now, these are small plants growing in pots, but 1,000 years from now, if we plant them, they'll be enormous trees, and they can last for thousands of years. It's so obvious to me that everyone has a role to play in this, and everybody is needed. And the biggest problem is we think of this in terms of cost, not think about this in terms of value, because the value of restoring the earth is vastly more than the value of things, which will end up in the waste bins or in the trash. So, I think the purpose for people in urban areas to understand this and to be able to act to change the central intention of human civilization away from this kind of materialistic economy to a functional economy. Now, that's a very hard thing to say when the entire billions of people are believing that, no, you can't change, this is immutable. But the only thing that I can say is, the only thing that is absolutely assured is that change will happen. And we need transformational change now, not just a small change. And the heritage trees are these wonderful ancient examples of the strength and vitality and beauty of nature, they are the kind of ambassadors for life, and we need to protect them. And we need people to realize it's not just lip service. We need to actually work to restore these functions because they're broken in many parts of the world. And that's what causes the droughts and the floods and the wildfires and the mudslides. And they're not natural, they're unnatural disasters. So.
Very interesting. So you're approaching this from a functional ecology perspective. There are, of course, many cultural values associated with heritage trees, and I think obviously that these trees that grow particularly old or large, you know, they can accommodate more or a greater range of habitats. They provide a greater range of microhabitats, let's say, available to more native biodiversity. And then, as I say, you know, there's this cultural dimension, and it seems that most cities have done very little to actually capitalize on that. We heard this morning that Cape Town is going to develop a walking trail to see the heritage trees of the city. I know that some work is underway in Portland, Oregon. They have a tree map, and I think in the city of Paris as well. So they're really playing on the ecotourism potential. You can go and see a tree that was planted by an ancient king, or one where a treaty was signed, or one which was used as some kind of post office in the past. And I wonder, Joy, turning to you now, what are some of the ways that local governments can leverage the potential of these heritage trees for all sorts of benefits, but also what support do local governments need in order to realize those benefits?
Thanks, Russell. Yeah, I think one of the things that there are several ways that local governments can be supported to leverage on these trees. One is to support them in terms of policies and regulations. And specifically for heritage trees, what is important is not to look at policies that are specific to heritage trees, but how do you balance different policies together? How do you look at policies that are related to transport or walking, what policies related to environment, and how do you ensure that there's coherence between these different policies to protect heritage trees? I think that's quite an important entry point so that we are able to protect them. The second thing is around capacity building, trainings, ensuring that the knowledge on the importance of heritage trees is passed down through different, government bodies. And as we know that there's always changes in government. Something else that we look at is also, basically ensuring that we are helping them secure funding. And because you mentioned the maintenance cost earlier, Russell, you talked about maintenance cost of these trees that can be quite high. So how can they also leverage on not only funding within the local government and from national government, but also external sources, so that they're able to use those funding to, for their conservation efforts. And this could even look at specifically own source revenue within their own spaces. How do you bring revenue and channel that into protecting heritage spaces? So, but what we are seeing particularly in urban planning, there's the importance of, integrating now urban plans with, heritage and looking at broader naturalization of cities. And one of the things that you could look at, even specifically bringing my perspective from public space, is ensuring incorporation of heritage elements and trees within public spaces. These are already spaces designated by the local authorities. How can they ensure that as they continuously upgrade these spaces, they integrate those heritage trees within them, and the ones that exist are already protected? For example, in Bahrain, I talked a little bit about Bahrain earlier, but I just want to mention that with the support that UN Habitat and FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, we are supporting the government with their, their afforestation plan. They have a really ambitious plan to plant 1.8 million trees. by 2035, but also quadruple the number of mangrove vegetations that they have. And additionally, they would like to be net zero by 2060. So where do you start with that? You start with understanding what you have as an asset within your city. Where are those trees? Where are those heritage trees? How can we protect them? And then how can we add additional trees within the spaces? So it has started with an national-wide assessment of all the trees that exist, mapping them out, and then going as well into capacity building and awareness raising. And awareness raising not only for the local governments, but also going to community level and informing them of the importance of trees. They have already selected a number of trees that they would like to do as part of their forestation. Key among them are the fig tree, the neem tree, which have cultural and ecological significance to the Bahraini government and the Bahraini community as well. So what we are seeing is that there are ways that, innovative ways that you can engage local governments, not only from policy, but also how you engage communities through placemaking activities, through them adopting these trees and actually being part of tagging those trees that exist within the cities. So I would say that, those are the main ways that, you can support local government, multifaceted, could be also related to other programs. If you're looking at programs on ecology or tree planting, how can you integrate that with heritage? Often as a cross-cutting theme within the area. So I think it's also a very collaborative approach that is needed. This cannot be solved only by local governments. We need multiple organizations coming on board to support, either policy capacity building, awareness raising, to ensure that these spaces are protected and the government are able to actually, protect these spaces, these trees. Thanks.
Thanks, Joy. Absolutely. And I think there is value in having a facility through which to share best practices in managing and conserving these ancient trees. I know in Asia, in some countries, they devote tender love and care to these old trees, wrapping them up with cloths in winter to avoid frostbite. I also know that there are ancient trees propped up on stilts, not least here in Scotland. And then there's a lot of work, I think, to be done in building awareness of them. So publishing books. I know Thomas Pakenham, who is an Irish chap, I think he's still alive, and he wrote a few books. One of them's called A Meeting with Remarkable Trees. And these are fascinating insights. He's also a very gifted writer, of course, but these are fascinating insights into some of the world's most remarkable trees. And earlier today we had another webinar, and GreenPop's Zoe Gold Angelucci was explaining or sharing some of her ideas for cities to take full advantage of these trees and also generate ecotourism to raise the funds to conserve them. And she suggested we should have QR codes at every one of them. There should be an international inventory of all these trees. We should use citizen science to engage local communities in appreciating them and monitoring their health. And then, of course, we should share best practices between practitioners who are actively and on the ground looking after them. And I know that there are problems with disease and as I said, climate change is not exactly helping, and then also the presence of people impacting on these trees. So there's also a need for more, I guess, social skills to manage them and conserve them properly. Now, I do want to field some questions from the fellow participants. I believe that there may be one or two in the chat box. If anyone has questions, please do pop them there and I'll relay them to the panelists. But I also have another question for you, John, which is, how do we really mainstream this reverence for trees? Throughout the past, trees have been really at the center of environmental movements. I'm thinking of the Chipko movement in northern India, where I believe women literally hugged trees. I think that's where the term tree hugger comes from. Or indeed in Joy's Kenya, where Wangari Maathai, famously started this green belt movement. And these are pockets of success, and there are many of them that are bound to tell the tale. But how do we really mainstream this across society? Because as you said, we do live in this very materialistic world where people seem to value material wealth more than natural abundance. And I wonder, what will it take to really shift the consciousness of humanity to revere and protect these natural treasures?
Well, I would say we have a choice. And so it's our choice to decide whether we see and understand and value nature, or whether we actually believe that things are what keep us alive. And also, I think that we have a problem with death, that we really need to realize that death is part of life, and that it's not, that it's normal. But I think also the knowledge exists now, but whether it is understood and processed or really deeply appreciated. And what I think, especially about the heritage trees, and also I see that David Milarch has not come on, sadly, but he runs an organization called the Archangel Ancient Tree Archive, and we work closely with them. And what they're doing is propagating the DNA of the most ancient trees. And I think for governments or for citizens or for people around the world, all people, we need to understand that for some time we have been breeding or hybridizing or genetically modifying plant DNA. And when we do that, we have to look like, why are we doing that? So sometimes we're doing it to make them miniature so that we can harvest with smaller machines, and have many trees in row after row of the same plant. And then a vehicle can go down and harvest from it. Or you can make some kind of mechanical thing that can just hoover up everything. And you don't need people for that. Or we're looking at decorative things that we're trying to put in our gardens, and we say this is very beautiful, and we just want this very beautiful thing, but we're not really thinking about the ecological function. And as I said earlier, we need to realize that long before there were human beings on the earth, there were all sorts of other organisms which were self-organizing to create the atmosphere and to constantly filter it and continuously renew it, and the freshwater system and the soil fertility. And there was differentiation and speciation leading to infinite potential variety in genetics. And if we think that these DNA that we have altered can do those things, we could be very, very mistaken. And when we do look at these ancient trees and the heritage trees, we're looking at the symbols or the remaining giants and the remaining strength and vitality of this ancient DNA. And so we really badly need to study this and understand it and propagate it. So the Archangel Ancient Tree Archive has been propagating ancient tree DNA all around the world, looking for the heritage trees, expressing the heritage trees, because this DNA is more robust, more vital, and very necessary. And so people all over the world, if they have this in their mind, if that becomes the central understanding, then it's kind of hard to do the other thing. Now the central understanding is we go shopping, and so it's hard to do the other thing. Everybody goes shopping, and we believe that that's valuable. But actually, the DNA of the ancient trees, the cycling of oxygen, the fertility of the soil, the water cycle is more valuable than everything that human beings have ever made and everything that human beings will ever make. And we're making an enormous mistake if we fail to understand that. So, that's that's my feeling. And I'm very sorry that David Melarche is not here, because he's a very interesting character who has over time saved and propagated many of the most important trees around the world.
Including the famous bristlecone pine, if I'm not mistaken. He has at least taken cuttings and managed to propagate them. And please remind me, do you know how old that tree is? Is it not 4,000 years? It's something quite extraordinary.
Well, there are many of the trees, I think it's older than that. The trees in the West Coast, the sequoias and redwoods of the coastal, they're 4,000 years old and about 400, more than 400 feet tall. So these huge giants, and interestingly, human beings have been tending those for at least the last 15,000 years. That's in the oral tradition of the local indigenous people there. So we know this, and some cultures protected and worshiped and made sacred these things, and others cultures didn't. And right now we have a global culture which was created through colonization, through expansion through armies, through warfare, through genocide and slavery. And we need to realize that everybody's indigenous to the planet, but at this time especially, we need peace. If we're going to survive as a species, and if other species are going to survive, we're going to have to realize what is truly valuable. And we're going to have to make some changes. And that doesn't mean it'll be a less quality of life. There'll be a higher quality of life. And a higher quality of life for everyone, not just more material things for some, and many, many hundreds of millions or billions of people who are disenfranchised and insecure all the time. So I think we have a lot to do, but I'm somewhat weirdly optimistic, because we see how many people want to restore the earth and how it's happening all over the planet. So all we have to do is do it, and we're going to be fine.
Well, that's a very inspiring note on which to end. Before we do, I think it is important to recognize we have come a long way in the conservation sector. We now have presidents and prime ministers clamoring to go to conversations to talk about the climate and ecological crisis, even if the action is sometimes not fully commensurate with the talk. And I think there is a backlash against materialism. We see in young people increasingly who are turning their backs on social media and saying, actually, this is not healthy. I want to wean myself off Instagram or TikTok, and I want to enjoy real life. I want to be present. I don't want to give all my time away to big technology firms. And there is this renewed interest, which is perhaps because of the gravity of the pollution crisis. There's a renewed interest in environmental cleanliness. People want to breathe clean air, drink clean water, and be able to experience beautiful, spectacular nature on their doorstep. And I am also very hopeful that we will see. In fact, we are seeing. There's no doubt about it. It's already started. You're leading this ecosystem restoration camps movement, and it's mushrooming. So there is reason to be hopeful. And I think maybe Joy, if I can bring you in just to share some final words, what gives you hope for the future, not just of heritage trees, but also for Mother Earth, for nature, whether in cities or beyond?
Thanks, Russell. I think that's quite a big ask as a landscape architect. I would like to see every single city embedded with nature. But I think, as you've mentioned, there's already this renewed appreciation for nature in cities. And what I hope for, and you could see that it kind of changed a little bit even during COVID, because people really wanted to be outside. And that is the appreciation of nature, that where it started. People just wanted to listen to birds and be outside, do their open gyms. So what I hope for is that one of the key things that will happen is that there'll be that integration of, we work harmoniously with nature as we grow, as we diversify, as we look at economic opportunities, we think about nature. Something else is that in the long run, we want to see those co-benefits. I think that is one of the biggest concerns that we have, is that the co-benefits that are accrued from nature are not, someone cannot realize them now. But then if the data is there and people actually realize this information, then there'll be even a bigger appreciation to integrating nature into cities. So that's really my hope. And I am looking forward to see greener cities, healthier cities in future. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joy. And thank you, John, for your superb contributions today. I've really enjoyed listening to you both. I find it very moving and inspiring, and lots of food for thought as well you've provided for taking this forward. There are plans among the partners who have organized this today to develop, at the very least, a concept note and perhaps even build a community of practice to share knowledge, record the locations of these heritage trees, and also try to increase ecological literacy and awareness of them, not least among citizens. And this could be achieved through citizen science, which is a forte of Earthwatch Europe. So we would be delighted to get involved in that sense. But thank you, and thank you very much to IUCN for providing the facilities today. We have, I think, it's all gone pretty smoothly, so that's much appreciated. And thank you to our participants who took the time to join us today. This will be shared, as I said earlier, it will be published on IUCN Gauge and also on social media networks, a recording. Okay. See you all later. Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.